Hello, class. Hope this message finds you happy, healthy, safe, and sound. Today, we're going to talk about politics and the media. What an interesting topic. So, what we're going to talk about today is a couple things. Number one, what is the media? Because you hear the word all the time, but we're going to define it. What is the media? Two, what impact do they have on politics? And three, how has the media changed politics as we know it? Probably a better question for number three is how hasn't the media changed politics, right? So, and we'll also look into some more stuff like the FCC and what the government can regulate and make rules about and what they can't. Okay, so let's get into it. First of all, what is the media? The media is, generally speaking, um, defined several ways that are correct. Okay, so you could say it in several different ways, but it has to have the essence of this definition. The media is the combination of all the news and opinion outlets, hypothetically, in the world. So the media of the world, all the journalists, all the reporters, all of the corporations that pay to have the reporters go out and do that, the ones that curate the content and decide what's on TV, all of that, right? That's the media. Add all of that up, that's the media. Okay, so you will have heard a couple of things that I'm about to say before if you've been around politics a long time. You probably will have heard, if you're a conservative or no conservative people, something like the statement like the media is liberal. Okay, let's address that because that is a sort of a real rumor that goes around quite a bit. First, let's address one question before we get into are they liberal or conservative? What motivates the media? That's the question we should be asking. Because if it is politics and they are motivated by being liberal or conservative, then we need to know that, right? But let's look into what really motivates the media, and we'll be able to examine and almost prove ourselves right just by looking at some examples of what we call the free market in democracy. So, the media, this is so important and maybe something you haven't necessarily been taught, but the media is very simply a reflection of what we want to see on TV, what we want to hear, what we want to watch. What do you mean, Professor? How is that so? So let's break it down. We have, say, Fox News on the right and MSNBC on the left. So Fox News is more conservative. MSNBC is more liberal. There's no questioning that. No one questions that, right? But what motivates them? Is it just their conservative ideology? Is it just a liberal ideology? Or do they know that there are a lot of conservatives and liberals out there that will watch? So they're trying to curate and give content to those viewers who already want this. And wait for it, they're giving them what they already want, and they're not necessarily lying about it. They're just presenting one side, or mostly one side, right? But wait, Professor V, I thought this was all about the free market. Yes, so here it comes down to, if you know you're trying to sell something to a target audience of conservatives or liberals, no matter, or if you're a middle news agency that isn't conservative or liberal, it just wants to be known as the best. Here's what all media agencies and all people that are working for media, the assumption is this: everyone is trying to make the most money they can, right? Everyone's trying to make the most money they can. So if you look at it from the perspective of big news channels like Fox News and MSNBC, yes, they are liberal over here, MSNBC, and conservative Fox News. They are. But they're capturing an audience that is exactly that, what they're preaching to, right? So in other words, the people that are watching Fox News want to see that perspective. That's why they watch it. So Fox News and MSNBC the same way for the liberal viewers, They're going to research and they're going to find out, what do people like to watch? What do our viewers want to see? And they'll put that on TV every time. What do I mean? They're not going to, who's they? The media, no one in any corporation that has ever wanted to stay in business is going to put something on TV that does not make money, right? So you might say, when I watch TV, like, there isn't a lot of substance in the news. It's a lot of this and that. That's a reflection of us. What do I mean? You and I might like deep, detailed news, and you and I might like, to be a neutral observer of politics and not conservative liberal and just be looking at it. But look, the media, just like every business, is going to follow where the money is. So let's give an example that will kind of really prove our point in a simple way. You all know this, that the Super Bowl comes but once a year in the United States. For me, it's the World Cup every 4 years, the men's and women's World Cup staggered, so you get to see one sort of right after the other. But the Super Bowl comes every year, and every American knows probably one thing, that the commercials are one of the funnest parts, right? Whether you like American football or not, you probably love the commercials. And what do we know about the commercials in the Super Bowl? Well, we know that they're like the newest, funniest, but let's get down to basics. How much do they cost? Here's a question you can go look up and you'll immediately find the answers in the millions of dollars, and it'll fluctuate, but $3 to $5 million roughly for airtime from 30 seconds to a minute. So imagine this, paying $3 million for 30 seconds of time. $3 million for 30 seconds of time. That's what the media, that's what they're demanding, right? If NBC's hosting or Fox is hosting the Super Bowl, or CBS, whoever bought the rights, you pay a ton of money to the NFL to broadcast their Super Bowl. But guess what? Then Doritos and Coca-Cola and Nike and everyone, they start calling you up and saying, you have the biggest show in the United States, the Super Bowl. It should be the World Cup, but you have the biggest show. Everyone's going to be watching it, about over 100 million people. It's quite a bit. Imagine this. If you spend $3 million for 30 seconds and you get 5% of the people watching to buy your product, you've made a profit, a huge profit. So it's worth it from Coca-Cola's perspective to put a 30-second ad and spend $3 million, because then people will be like, and they'll, next time they're at the store, they choose the Coke. I'm used to seeing that was in the Super Bowl. You don't even necessarily realize it, that it's subconsciously you're being advertised to, because we see it so much. We're so saturated. So here's how you know if a show is popular. Ready? Go look at how much it costs to put a commercial on. If the commercials cost an entirely insane high amount, then that show is popular. It's just that simple. People are watching. No advertiser, no Coca-Cola is not going to pay to the $3 million to put on when, afternoon soap operas are on. No offense to telenovelas, as much as we all love them. They're not going to get the same viewership as the World Cup. So stay with me. What is the number one, first most important thing we're learning about the media? The media, we defined as all of the news and around the world. We just call it the media. That they're not necessarily in any way connected. They're in fact competing with each other for money and for your attention, right? But we know this much: they are about the money. It's not a criticism. It's not even anything other than observation. It's just the way it works. Shows that are popular, they go on and on and on. Like shows that I've liked over the years. I don't know if you've ever liked them. Like shows like The Office. If it's not popular after about the second year, if you get that far, and there's nobody lining up to put commercials on that show, it never makes it to Netflix. It never, now stuff goes direct to Netflix, right? But does that make sense? So advertising is a way that we express how popular a show is. In other words, if you see a high advertising dollars like the Super Bowl, you know that we are watching. Most Americans are watching. Does that kind of make sense? And so that's the first way. So what is the media going to put on TV? What are they going to focus on in the news? If you're Fox News and your viewers are conservative and you want to make money, you're going to find as many conservative stories that fit the overall narrative of what your viewers believe in, the overall ideology they believe in politically. You're going to go find stories that confirm, I hate to say it, and it could be true on this side too, confirm their bias, right? And not look, being conservative or Democrat isn't necessarily a bad bias in and of itself. Everyone has biases. Like I'm biased against meat. I'm vegan, so it doesn't mean I'm judging it. But bias can, of course, in the wrong context. If you're biased against someone's race, then that is wrong, right? So depending on where the word is used, it has different meanings to some extent. Does that make sense? So I'm biased against meat, but you're not biased against. I'm not biased against people, right? And so that's where the word anyway. You could do this with all these words, right? So it's important that you know that the people who are biased towards a liberal view or a conservative view, they're going to watch those shows, and Fox News and MSNBC are going to put on speakers and content that makes those viewers want to watch more. And why does all this matter, Professor? What does that have to do with money? Because then the more people that are watching, the more Coca-Cola pays to put their advertisement on that show. And so that's kind of an easy way to assess the popularity of almost anything is how many advertising dollars are connected to it. The more advertising dollars, the bigger show. And so the media, number one, I want you to write down in your notes, what is the number one factor that will determine what a given media outlet puts on TV? What's the number one factor? And I'm teaching you the number one factor that determines what they will put on their show is money. The number one factor. And it's not their fault necessarily. They have to stay in business. They want to expand their business. They want to maybe even be super wealthy, whatever. But as a business person, that's your goal, right? To have as many people on board as possible, to get as much money as possible. So that is what you should think of, is what content you see on the media. And you might say, oh, it's all the media is doing that. The media is just a reflection of what we want. They poll and ask people, what do you want to see? And we tell them. I've gotten these in the mail before, right? You probably have too. Most of the time we throw them away, don't even look at it, don't even know what it is, think it's junk mail. I've been like curious enough to open one, and Nielsen public ratings has been around for 50 years at least. And I think I've said this for another example, but they'll literally send you a dollar bill, a fresh dollar bill. This is true. They do this as well. They send you this dollar bill, and they say if you fill out the survey, they'll send you back a $5 bill. And if the survey is, so what kind of TV do you like? What kind of this? What kind of that? What kind of music do you listen to? What kind of news are you interested in? And they ask people questions, and based on what people say is what they put on. And I've actually been called on the phone before. One of the few times I didn't hang up right away, and got through and did a whole survey on what I wanted to see on TV. And that one was years ago, the phone one. But not that long ago, when I got the one in the mail and actually brought it to class before, COVID shut everything down, to show students. And I don't know where it is now. I think I have my dollar somewhere saved. But the point is what? The media is only going to put on TV what makes money. And they're going to put on, if they have a choice between two things, something that's full of content, is really going to educate people, and it's going to be good, quality news, or something that's going to make a ton of money. Which one do you think they're going to put on? I'm just going to tell you right now. The one that chooses the good educational quality thing and misses out on the money isn't going to be able to do that very many times. They're going to go run out of business. So what you and I see on TV is a reflection of what you and I have been asked. Maybe not. Maybe you haven't gotten the survey. Maybe I won't get it again. But what people are being asked, and what people are telling the media, this is what we want to see. This is what we want to see. And so it goes on TV, and advertisers pay big bucks for you to see it. And hopefully not turn the channel during the commercial. YouTube, you might say, I don't watch TV. YouTube. My youngest daughter's 4. She can't stand the commercials. And I'm like, I feel you, sister. This capitalism, you're growing up in it. Because at the beginning of her little videos, she'll see, go buy Clorox bleach wipes or something. And I'm like, that must be for the parents because she only washes her hands when I bug her, about it. Um, does that make sense? So, and that's another thing you could think about is why during a kids show would they put on a commercial for like, you know, a cleaning product for an adult? Well, because they assume there's probably an adult, hopefully, somewhere nearby the kid who's watching that, sees the commercial. The commercial is not for the kid. The kid doesn't have any money. You have the money. You're the parent. So now you're like, oh, yeah, I do need to clean up. Right. And so everything, just think about that. Everything, even if you go to Facebook, I haven't been on for a while, but I'll tell you this. If the last time I went on, it was amazing how much they knew about me. It was like, do you want to buy a soccer goal? Do you want to buy, you know, this new rock album? Do you want to buy a Black Lives Matter T-shirt? And I'm like, yes, yes, yeah. How did you know? It's insane, right? And the effort with which corporations and companies will go to to find out what you like, so they can advertise not just in mass, but specifically to you on like pages like Facebook. Instagram does it a little differently, but they still do it. I have a friend I went to college with, Kyle Krieger, and his sister Allie Krieger won the World Cup twice, the Women's World Cup twice, and he gets money on Instagram by he has like 2 million followers or something. I played college soccer with him, and hi Kyle, I don't know if you watch my videos. You're way more famous than me and Allie. But they get paid in part by just going on Instagram and like wearing certain things or promoting certain things, right? So commercials are everywhere. They're in everything, and that is how people make money in the media. Okay, so number one reason why you see the stuff you see on TV is not I'm gonna shatter some people's myths. It's not because the media is some altogether think tank where they're all trying to control what you see and what you think and what you eat and who you are, and then to just there's no such thing. That is is not true. It's imaginary. It's imaginary. What is happening is we already want the things that we end up seeing on TV. That's why they put them on. And then some of us say like, why is that always on TV? Why that type of show? Maybe you and I don't watch that type of show, but somebody's watching it. Does that make sense? So don't. I guess what I started out with was, there's this question of is the media more liberal or more conservative? You could argue that based on people's schooling and education and these other various factors, that people who are journalists that work for the media or in the media tend to be more liberal leaning or vote more. You could have, but at the end of the day, look, we're still coming down to the basic fact: people are trying to make money. Okay, so number two, how do you know if the media is reliable? How do you know if a news organization isn't just lying its tail off? Here's the good news: news corporations, news organizations, they rely on one thing more than anything, which is this: they rely on legitimacy. They rely on you trusting them. If you don't trust a news organization, they're done, right? They could do polls, you won't believe them. Why? Because they've already lied to you. So let me give you. So you might say this. You might have heard this. Does the media just make up stuff? Is it just a bunch of lies? There are lies out there. Of course there are, and there's a bunch of false stuff. Probably more so on maybe TikTok and stuff that's not verifiable than say like I don't know on a news web page, right? But let me give you one example that should make you feel better about why it's so hard to lie to the American people from a major news organization and get away with it. It's very difficult. You might say, why? Because everyone's eyes are now. It's true. There's a million different sources of news now, and 999,000 of them are nonsense. And they're just someone typing something and then just putting it on the internet. That's why I taught you all to go look at a poll, right? And go see what that poll says and find out if it's proper methodology. Who did they ask? What did they ask? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Number two for the media, this is number one, remember, they're all about money. Number two, the content that they put on is going to be almost always, if not always, consistent with what people want, and it's going to be consistent with what makes money. So if you look at shows that change over time and news organizations we were talking about that lose trust, here's an example where a news organization lost trust, and one person that was on the air for almost 40 years was gone in one day. So there's a guy named Dan Rather, and in 2004, George W. Bush was running against John Kerry. John Kerry was the Democrat, George W. Bush was the Republican running again. Okay. So he's running for re election, George W. Bush versus John Kerry. Okay. And at this time, this is in 2004, the media is probably, let's say, evenly split, although some people would argue that it was more conservative than, or excuse me, more liberal than conservative. But on CBS one night, not Fox News, CBS News anchor Dan Rather had gotten a piece of information, and here's the information essentially said something like George W. Bush was supposed to, do something with the National Guard, and he didn't show up for his duty. And whatever that story was, Dan Rather, this guy who'd been a CBS News anchor for 30 some years, trusted, everyone's watching him every night all over America. He gets this story about George W. Bush, and I want to be as accurate as I can be about this story. As far as I know, he didn't know that the story was not true. He didn't know that it was essentially a lie. He didn't know that. But here's why he got fired, and here's why it's such a big deal. Because he told a story on TV anyway, without checking, without verifying, without vetting the story. That whether he knew or whether he didn't know and he didn't vet it, just as bad. He told something about a presidential candidate that wasn't true on national TV in front of the whole world. And guess what? Goodbye, Dan Rather. 30 some odd years of service. I don't know how many years it was off the top of my head. But now he's resigned to a corner on Facebook, and he has a couple million followers, and he has, you could argue, thoughtful things to say. But he's not. He's gone. He is gone from the world of CBS News and the major news networks where you watch that stuff, and they're not going to be able to just make stuff up. They're not going to be able to get away with it. This story is really important proof. You might say why? Because the average person that's watching, after they get lied to once and then they know that it's a lie, they're not going to watch that show again unless it's just for entertainment because they don't think it's serious news. You just got lied to. So CBS had to fire Dan Rather. There's no choice for them to hold legitimacy. He has to be gone, right? And you have to address that and say, but even let's say give it worst case scenario and say it was a lie, and let's say it was purposeful, and I don't know a person's heart. But even if that's the worst case scenario, one lie, gone. Decades of telling. And I'm going to be honest, I think it's a good thing. He has to be gone, right? Why? Because that way you maintain the trust with your viewers. You don't tell something that isn't completely sure. You could say our sources are telling us, right? But you don't pad it with that and you just put information out there and it's completely false. Today, in this day and age, you can't do it. There are too many eyes on you. There's too much light out there to shine in on what you're saying and make sure see if it's true or not. Does that make sense? And so, number one, media follows the money. Number two, they have to at least really try to follow the truth or they will lose business. And again, that might even go back to number one, right? Is maybe that's why they're telling the truth because they don't want to lose business. But hey, either way, that's good for the viewer, right? Now, number three, I'm not going to sit here and paint a perfect picture of the media. It is true that there is nonsense out there. And so number three, you could say that there is fake news. There is fake news. Now, I would argue that Donald Trump's definition of fake news may not be the same definition that political scientists hold. So I'm not going to get into Donald Trump because it's not my job, but I will say this. Here's something that we can definitely say is fake news. Okay, for example, um, so there was somebody who put out. This is going to blow some of your minds. There was someone who put out a conspiracy theory, fake news, that a couple years ago that said, remember, this is fake news, but when you listen to the whole story, realize the ending, someone thought it was real and acted on it. Okay. So some real fake news. This is the fake news. Ready? There's a pizza parlor in DC, I believe, where Hillary Clinton is running. Again, this is fake news. Hillary Clinton was said to be running a like sex slavery, underage sex slavery operation in a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. This is not a joke. Well, the news is a joke, but the next part is not a joke. Ready? Someone heard that fake news and they went into the pizza parlor with guns blazing. I don't think they killed anyone, thank goodness, but they went to jail because you can't just bust into a pizza parlor if it's not true, and there is no Hillary Clinton running a sex slavery thing. If you just go in and that's completely wrong, then you just walked into a restaurant with guns blazing, right? So that, I mean, I don't want to laugh at the person who did it. It's sad, but it's comical that someone would actually believe that that was real news, not check other sources as you've been taught to do, right? Not verify it, just be like, well, it's from my news source that I trust, so that must be true, and goes in to save the day and is now in jail. It's that so fake news does exist. So the question is, how do you weed it out? And the answer is you go look at other sources. I'm just going to tell you personally, I don't consider myself conservative or liberal, and I watch and make myself look at and read Fox News, MS, and MSNBC. Now, number 4, CNN. I know, a whole number just for CNN. CNN is an interesting example because when I started teaching, and I'm sure there can be people out there who watch this that might disagree with this, but again, I don't consider myself conservative or liberal. And when I first started teaching in 2007 in college, I thought that CNN was the fairest of the news. Yes, it probably had bias like the others, but it wasn't super conservative or super liberal. It was as close to being just fair and in the middle as I could find. Okay. Now, you fast forward to today, and Donald Trump tweets as a president of the United States a video of him back when he was doing WWF wrestling or WWE, and he slams someone to the ground in the WWE, But instead of this, Trump tweets a picture of, instead of the person's face he's stomping on, like actually that he was doing in the video, he replaces the person's face with the CNN logo. So let me just say this, Trump hates CNN. I don't think I'm putting words in his mouth. He calls them fake news constantly. What is going on with CNN and Trump and every? So let me explain. CNN, I will say, has moved from neutral to, I mean, I don't want to say anti-Republican. I think it's more anti-Trump. And to be fair, a lot of it is they're just reporting what he says, and he'll tweet something that people think is racist, and then some people will say, well, CNN is just going after the president. Well, in some cases, they're just reporting what he really did. Okay. But here's where CNN and Trump get interesting. So Trump hates CNN. He has a video of him on his Twitter feed. If you go look, find it, of him stomping on CNN's face. He hates them. Why? And he says they're fake news. Well, let me take you back. When Trump was running for president, he had I would argue, like a brilliant strategy. And I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying that what he said was good. I don't think what he said was good. But he would say these outrageous things that no politician's ever said before. And let me give you like a neutral one. What I mean is it's not as neutral as I can think of for Trump. He said that Donald Trump, when he's running for president, said he could go down, I think it was Main Street or Fifth Avenue, and shoot someone and not lose any supporters. Do you guys remember him saying that? Okay. He would say things that were so outrageous like that. Why do I say outrageous? Because no presidential candidate ever in history has ever said anything like that, ever, out loud, right? So CNN is covering this, and they're saying like, oh my gosh, he just said this thing, he just said this other thing, and they're covering it, and the whole time that Trump's running for re-election, election, before he's president, as he's running, I don't know if most people didn't think he was serious for a long time until he started winning Republican primaries. But he starts going through, and throughout the whole thing, CNN's covering all of his rallies. They're covering all the things he's saying live, and they're giving him so much time in the air. And Trump's brilliance, my point was that he would say these horrible, outlandish things and have political brilliance, even though I disagree with it, is he would say these outlandish things, and then the media has to cover it. They can't ignore a statement like I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose voters. They can't not report that, right? So CNN was saturating their network with Trump. I think in a sense of like saying like, can you believe what he's saying? And but here's what from Trump's perspective it was like, I'm getting free airtime. I'm getting so much free airtime. So there have been studies showing, and I'd have to look at them in detail to be able to completely know this for sure, but there's no question that Donald Trump got more news coverage than Hillary Clinton. And part of that was because of Donald Trump's strategy of just saying such outlandish things that the media would have to cover it. And they couldn't not cover it, right? So CNN is in this weird special place now where the president hates them and calls them fake news. They don't make up stories. They can't get away with that, right? We already talked about Dan Rather. But man, if you watch CNN now, they definitely they'll take him to task on everything. And whereas Fox News, you'll see, he'll go on, say, Sean Hannity, which he did this last weekend, and get asked what people are usually called softball questions, right? Like super easy to answer. I'm on your side. I don't want to trip you up. And then sometimes candidates will go on the other side and talk to, Elizabeth Warren was a candidate running for president. She made a really interesting choice. She said when she was running, now it's Joe Biden that has won the nomination, although she may be chosen as vice president. We'll see. She decided during the Democratic primaries that she would not go on Fox News. She said that they were just a mouthpiece for the president and that they were kind of promoting his propaganda. And so she just wouldn't go on it. And there were two sides to that. The first side was like, good for her, like this is such a conservative outlet and they only report good stuff about Trump. They don't even look at the bad. They may not lie, but they're really painting a picture that isn't true. Good for her for not going on. The other side's going to say, you serious? Half the country watches Fox News and you're too good to go on? You're proving why conservatives don't like the liberal elite, right? Now, do you see, by the way, I'm not taking sides, but these are the two sides arguing. One's going to say it's brilliant, good for her, don't go on that. That place is vile, don't go on that station. And the other side's going to say, so you think half the country is vile? Because not literally half the country watches it, but, it's a pretty good split. You usually don't watch this and this religiously, right? Unless you're a political science professor and you want to see both sides constantly. But does that make sense? So CNN, what I want you to know about them is that they are in a precarious position with the president where some people within the organization have publicly expressed regret that they gave Trump so much free airtime. But now they are probably one of the most, if not the most critical station. Now, that doesn't mean they're biased. I just want to say one more thing. A TV station, a commentator, a radio station, they can say something critical of the president, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're biased, right? In other words, they could say like, When the president tweeted a video where this guy was shouting white power, that was a bad thing. You could say that and not be even taking a Republican conservative side. You could just be saying that's just wrong, And so there are times when media organizations do that. Most media organizations will stay away from saying the word lie. So, like if a politician's caught in a lie, they'll be very careful not. You'll notice this. It takes a lot for a news organization to say the word lie, because there's a possibility, and here's where we come to the last point. What happens if the media does lie about you? In other words, someone in power in the media, in Dan Rather or whoever, does lie, and whether it's intentional or not, actually, it'd especially be important that it would be intentional. But let's just say they lie about you and they put something out there. This person did this. It's just not true. You didn't do it. You just didn't do it. You can sue that person and you can win, because what that person is doing is they are impugning your integrity and they're saying something false, knowingly, especially if it's knowingly false, and therefore they are liable. Okay, so if somebody lies about you in print and there's knowledge that they knew that it wasn't true, but they printed it anyway, or they said it anyway in front of the public in the media, that person is liable. What that means, liable. That means is you can sue them and you can probably win, right? Now, if there's an honest mistake or something like that and it's recanted, it's going to be harder. But if somebody just puts a bold-faced lie out there, like in the student newspaper, so-and-so cheats, and that's how they have a 4.0 GPA, and you just don't cheat, and you do have a 4.0. Good for you, by the way. That's awesome. Then you could sue that person because that's maligning your character, and it's your reputation, right? And it's verifiably false, to the extent that it would be. Then you're going to win that lawsuit. All right. And so that's a way that the media can be held accountable, aside from the fact that if you lie and you're in the media, no one's going to watch your news anymore unless they just want to watch lies, right? And so the last thing we're going to talk about is the FCC. The FCC is what governs the media except for the internet. It doesn't touch the internet. So the FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. The Federal Communications Commission. And this is a group of people that go through the same process of the president appoints someone and they're said yes or no by the Senate and confirmed or not. And they go into a 5-year term. And these people that are in the FCC, this Federal Communications Commission, their job is basically to decide for the country what are explicit words, cuss words, what are words that can't be said among immature audience. In other words, if there's kids around, what words can we not use in a show? What type of ratings should we have, etc. So FCC actually has a website where you could go even on your phone and you could complain about a list of things. And one of them is probably my favorite to complain about is that the commercials are too loud. That's actually one of the complaints that you can make. So the FCC is in charge of things even like that, even as you could argue silly as that, right? As the commercials are too loud. The FCC is the Federal Communications Commission in charge of, and here's a couple things they're in charge of. Number one, we already said what words are not okay to say on air, right? So if you said, I'm not going to cuss, but if you said, shit, is that going to have to be bleated out, or is it fine to say that? Or if it is fine to say that, after what hours? Right? You've known this. You've heard songs on the radio where maybe they haven't bleeded it out, and you're thinking, did they just drop the F-bomb and they didn't bleed it out? You probably did hear that right. They probably did drop the F-bomb and they probably did not bleed it out. So how is that possible if the FCC is saying that it's illegal and you can't play cuss words on live air? Here's what happens. The FCC gets reports from people that go on their phone or their computer or whatever, call and say, I heard a cuss word on this station. Literally. And so then the FCC will come in and fine people and organizations based on their breaking the rules. The problem is, for the FCC, there's so many different radio stations across the country, thousands and thousands. it's impossible for them to keep tabs on everyone for every second of every day. So you might get lucky or unlucky and hear a cuss word and non-filtered, non-censored. And this is important. The FCC doesn't do the censoring. They're asking you to do it, or they'll fine you. Does that make sense? The government doesn't censor stuff. Family Guy doesn't go to the government and say, "We're done with our episode. Can you see it now?" That's crazy. No, that doesn't happen. Although Family Guy was banned in Venezuela, so you can look that up. I think other countries too, but so I hope that gives you a picture. The FCC is going to set standards about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And can I ask you a question? Is it possible that 50 years ago, what we thought was appropriate on TV is not anymore? Yeah, like completely. So everything from, racial awareness is much better now than it has been. So there are brands like Aunt Jemima that are changing their branding because of the racist history that comes along with the brand. And so there's a lot of good change that's coming right now, right? The FCC isn't making anyone do that. These are these corporations doing that on their own. So the FCC, all they're going to do is if you put content on that was, it was 50 years ago, it was fine, but now we're like, we examine it, that's racist. How are we ever okay with that? And I'm not going to take a side on this, but like movies like Gone with the Wind, should it be just taken off the air because of the racial implications if you've seen the movie? The FCC doesn't decide stuff like that, but what they decide is this word or is this thing finable? In other words, if you do show this movie, this FCC is not going to go censor your movie for you. But if you put it on the air on ABC or whatever channel and you don't censor it and it has these things that they've said are now unacceptable, you're going to get fined for every single thing that is on that list. And so that is why the FCC has some power. They can't go in and arrest you. They can just fine you into doing what they want you to do, which is not put cuss words on or whatever. Does that make sense? There's one last thing the FCC can do, and then we are done with this lecture, so I know you're excited. FCC can help to stop media monopolies from ever occurring. So a media monopoly would be as if CBS and ABC and all these news organizations all conglomerated into one news organization. That would be devastating, and it would be almost the end of democracy if all news organizations were owned by one entity or one person. Why? Because then there would only be one place to get your news. And so one weird thing about the free market is it sounds free, like the government's not involved, right? Laissez-faire, hands off. One thing about laissez-faire, hands off is in a free market, laissez-faire, which means hands off economy, the government has to get its hands on during one situation always. And that's when monopolies are being formed. They have to break up the monopoly and allow there to be many providers of that service. In this case, the service is news. So we really need the diversity, right? We can't have a monopoly up here because then we have one source of news for everything. And that's a disaster because there's no competition. And competition is what makes people better. It makes people more honest. It makes people give you a better product for, in most cases, for a cheaper price, right? So I hope this makes sense. I hope this drives home some new points for you. Try to think about the media in a little bit of a different way. Next time you are mad that what is on TV is on TV, you should be mad at society because now you know that we are the ones asking for that stuff to be on TV because otherwise it wouldn't be. There would be no money to follow it and it would just go off the air like every other unpopular show. So watch with wisdom. I'll talk to you all soon. Now you know more about the media. Professor V signing off for now.